Sheets has a ton of tricks and treats that people either don't know or they underutilize. So here are 31 tricks in Google Sheets or treats that will make your life better. Let's dive in. Now let's say you want to have a specific color scheme. You can do so by going to Format, Themes, then you can choose one that's pre-made, or you can customize one yourself by clicking on Customize. And from here, you can select different colors for each of the different accents, the text color, and so forth. If you're like me, you're not sure which colors look good together, so you can use a website like Coolers and cycle through different color schemes. When you have one that you like, you can lock it in. Then the rest of the colors will update, but it will always look good with the color that you selected. And you can do this when you select all the colors. If you want to copy a color, you can simply click on Copy. Then you'll go to whichever part of the theme you want to replace. Click on the little plus button, paste that hex code, and press OK. And as you can see, accent number 4, which was the green, is now that new color that we selected. And you can do the same for each of the colors. If you have a color on your screen that you want to use, but you're not sure the hex code, you can simply click on the dropper, select the color, and the hex code will automatically be inserted to match that color. So themes are a nice little treat that will help you personalize your spreadsheet. Now normally when you see formulas built, you'll see a similar formula within all the different cells in the column. They're just referencing different cells. But this will kill any future data because when something's added, you have to go in and manually adjust those formulas to reflect the new item. And if you've been around my channel, you know I love automation, so that's just not going to fly. So instead, we're going to turn this into an array formula. And you can use the hotkeys on my screen or type it in manually. Then we'll change A2 to A2:A. You can see we get NAs at the bottom, and that's because we're having missing values that show up. But just like in a typical array formula, we can put a comment at the end to make it a blank if it's missing. And we can do the same thing for the next formula. So we'll put array formula, then change F2 to F2:F and E2 to E2:E. And now you can see it goes past where we want it to go. So right after the array formula, we're going to type if, open parentheses, is blank, open parentheses, A2:A, close parentheses, comma, comma, then press enter. So now we're good. And best of all, if more information gets added later, it will populate automatically. We have our formula here in C2. And if the formula doesn't make sense to you, go back and check out my last video on array formulas. And we can easily see that A2:A is within this data. But since these two are in the data tab, I have no idea what they're referencing. So I have to go in there and see, okay, it's referencing the quantity and the price. But one way to combat this is we can add name ranges. So I can select the range, then go to data, named ranges. And I could add the name right there, but there's an easier way to do this. All I have to do is go to the box just to the left of the formula and type in the new name. So I named F2 all the way through the end of column F, price, and I'm naming E2 to the end of column E, quantity. So now if I go back to my formula, instead of having data E2:E and data F2:F, I can simply type in price times quantity. So now you can see exactly what's being multiplied. And when it comes to configuring it, I don't have to leave the spreadsheet, so it's super easy. And if I want to find the range behind the name range, all I have to do is click on the drop down next to the formula bar, and it'll be right there. Here we're going to talk about a checkbox toggle. And with a checkbox toggle, when a checkbox is checked, one formula will execute, and when it's unchecked, a different formula will execute. So for example, right now the total only includes accounts that are in commit or enclosed, but I want to have it optional where I can include the best case as well. So I'm going to copy the formula that we just had. And after the equal sign, I'll put if, open parentheses, B1 equals true. And then I'll paste the formula I just copied and put a comma. Now I'm going to separate it to make it a little bit easier to read. And in the first section that will execute if it's true, I'm going to copy one of these sum-if formulas and paste it at the end, and then simply change the criteria to best case. So the way this works is if the box is checked, that top formula will execute. And if it's not checked, the bottom formula will execute. So you can easily toggle between two different values. We're going to talk about the offset formula. This one's super powerful, but I feel like it's often underused. So for example, we can type equals offset, and it works exactly like it sounds. So we'll select the cell reference. In this case, I'm going to put C12. And then you'll put a number for the rows and the columns saying where you want it to be offset from. So for example, if I put 0, 0, it will show me the contents of cell C12. But if I change the offset rows to -1, it will show me one row above C12. So for example, you see I have train SDRs on a new tool. If I change the columns to 1, it will show me 1 to the right. So now it's pointing to D11, and if I change D11, it will update automatically. And that's how it works in a nutshell. So when it comes to using this in a formula, you can see this formula right here I have for the automatic counter. I'm taking the maximum of A2 through the offset of 1 before A11. So in action, I'm taking the maximum of 1 to 9, then adding 1 to it to create an automatic counter. In its simplest form, smart chips are a clean way to link things or rate things. So for example, I could type @ then the name of a file. And now I have the name of the file in this smart chip link, and I can hover over it to see a quick synopsis. Or I could type @ then somebody's name that I've interacted with before, and it will bring up their contact card. Or I could type @ in a stock symbol, and it will bring up different financial options. And once you select one, you'll be able to hover over it to see how it's performing recently, and you'll have it pop out directly to more information. Another thing you can do is type @ then the name of a restaurant, and you can link the restaurant directly. And that way, if you want to reference it later on, it's right there for you to see. I'm sure a lot of you know that Gemini exists, which is Google's AI. And most people are probably used to using the standalone website, but you can actually upgrade your plan to have Gemini directly in your Google Sheets files. So for example, I could put a prompt that's referencing specific data in my spreadsheet. And in this case, I wanted to look up all the companies I have listed and provide the company headquarters, a description of the company, estimated annual revenue, and the top 5 competitors for each. And not only did it provide the information, but since it's integrated into my Google Sheet, I can insert it directly into my spreadsheet. And if I want to get additional information based off of the top 5 competitors that they provided, I can simply ask it, and then I'll have the same information for all of those competitors. So this is a really cool and quick way to do some lead generation and see where you should be focusing your efforts. And best of all, you got all this information in a fraction of the time that you would have if you were searching manually. We're talking about creating dynamic text fields. So for example, if you look at the sentence in row 1, all the different values update depending on which person I select. And to do this, it's actually very simple. All you need to do is have some fields that will update depending on what value is placed. Then in the formula, all you're doing is adding text and joining it together with cells via an ampersand. And if you've seen my videos before, you know that an ampersand acts as a join. So let's walk through it. So I'll put equals A3, ampersand, quote, space. And in this case, I'm putting the quantity sold in the amount. So I'll put space, sold, space, quote, ampersand, cell B3, which contains the quantity, ampersand, then in quotes, space, units, totaling, space, $, quote, ampersand, then the total amount. And you might have noticed that we added a $sign manually instead of having it in number form, and that's because when you change it to a text, it's no longer in number format. I'm going to show you how to create a live website when you only know part of the URL. So for example, in column B, we have some text that's the last part of the URL, and specifically, these are the unique identifiers for each of the products on my shop. But the unique identifiers could be the account IDs or anything like that. And in cell C1, we have the root of the website, and the root's just the part that stays the same regardless of what product you're on. So to create a live link to the website, all we have to do is put equals, then inside quotes, put that root, put an ampersand, and then we can link to the unique product IDs. And once we press OK, you can see that we now have live versions of all the websites. And when I select one, you can see it opens up automatically. Here we're talking about grouping data inside of a pivot table. And this is actually something I just showed my boss how to do the other day, so you'll probably use it all the time. As you can see in column A, we have a bunch of dates listed. But as you can see, they're listed one day at a time, and that's because that's how it is in our data set. But you can right-click on a date, go to Create Pivot Date Group, and select a different type of grouping. So for example, I can put year and quarter to group it by quarter, or I can change it to, let's say, day of the week, and I can see all of it based off what day of the week it was sold. So I can quickly see that most of my sales come on Monday. But what if you don't have dates? So you can see here we have enterprise, mid-market, and small business. And if you right-click on one, you don't see an option to group them. However, if you select the options that you want to group and then right-click, you'll see Create Pivot Group. And once you select that, you'll see a new grouping appear. And you can rename it whatever you want. And it will be pretty similar to what you have, but now you'll have subtotals for that new group. I'm going to show you how to return multiple values based off a single XLOOKUP formula. So normally, when you have an XLOOKUP formula, you'll put equals XLOOKUP. Then you'll select the search key. In this case, I have the drop down for my names. Then I'll select the search range, which is my associates. And then I'll select the return range, which is the range I want to return. In this case, it's the Q1 sales. So as you see, we have an NA, and that's because nothing is found. But once I select an associate, a number will populate. But what if I want to return multiple results at once? All I have to do is put curly braces around the expanded range, and it will return multiple results at once. So now I have Q1, Q2, and Q3 sales for John Smith. And I can make this easier to read by adding labels up top as well. And now if I select different associates, all 3 results will be automatically returned based off that single formula. We're going to talk about dropdowns. Since dropdowns are super useful, there's a lot of different ways to add them, but my favorite is going to Insert Dropdown. And once you do that, you'll see this data validation rule editor pop up. And inside that editor, you can simply put whatever dropdown options you want and assign a color. And once you hit done, you'll be able to exit out of the editor. And then if you click on the dropdown, you'll see the options that you put. And this is great, but this is not the trick. Creating a dropdown from a list is. So instead of having the dropdown, we'll click dropdown from a range, click the 4 little boxes, and then we're going to select the range that we want to include. And it will automatically extract all the unique values that are listed in that range. If you want to, you can add different colors to your options just like last time. And just like last time, all of the options are now listed inside the dropdown. But there's 2 differences. 1, we don't have to type anything. And 2, if any of the options changes, it will automatically update the dropdown to reflect. It will default to gray, but if you want to add more colors, you can simply click on the pencil and add a color. and now it's good to go. And this one's a good trick that I don't use too often, but when I do, it's definitely needed. If you've been around my channel, you know that XLOOKUP exists, and that's a great way to retrieve information. But what if you want to retrieve it dynamically based off of the column and the row? We can type equals index, then select all of the return options. Then we'll put a comma and put XMatch. Then we'll select our search key, and then all of the range that the search keys are possible in. Then we'll put a close parentheses, comma, XMatch again. And just like last time, we're going to select the search key, then put a comma and select all the different options where the search key could be possible. And once you press enter, it will return the value correlated with both of those search keys. And we can quickly apply this to the entire table by anchoring in the different ranges with $signs. So those will be an absolute reference, but for the search keys, we want to have a mixed reference. For the first search key, I want the row to be able to shift, but not the column, so I'll anchor in the column. And I'll do the opposite for the second search key, so I will anchor in the row. And now we can use the fill handle to drag the formula down to the entire table. I'm going to show you how to sync a live table directly into your Google Sheet. So for example, let's say we want to see the top 25 college football teams, and we want this to be live so we can see when it changes each week. And this is super simple to do. So all we need to do is grab the URL from the top, go back to our spreadsheet. Inside wherever you want it, we can type equals import HTML. Inside quotes, we'll put that URL. Then we'll put a comma. Then we'll put table inside of quotes, comma 1, and then press enter. And once you authorize it, you'll see that table flow through automatically. And if you're wondering why there's 3 letters in front of each name, that's specific to this table because there's a flag there and it's the name of the flag. But that's a quick fix if it bothers you. Now, since we have a 1 in the formula, we have this first table. But if we want to have the second table instead, all we have to do is go into the formula and change that 1 into a 2. And now instead of having that first table, it's showing the second table instead. And when those tables are updated, the spreadsheet will update along with it. We're going to talk about a relatively new feature in Google Sheets called tables. And you can insert a new table, but if you already have data, you can format it as a table by selecting the range, then clicking Format, Convert to Table. And now that it's in table format, it automatically identified the date with the pop-out calendar, as well as the currency. And you can edit any of the column types by clicking on the drop-down and selecting Edit Column Type. So for example, if I want to add a new drop-down, I can simply click drop-down, assign different colors if I want to, then hit done, and my drop-down is complete within seconds. You can also create custom views. So for example, I can click on the table button, create group by country, and it groups by the country. Then I can filter by just enterprise, for example. And once you have it like you like it, you can hit save view and name that whatever you want it to be. So I'll say int by country, then hit save. And now it's a save view. So even if I refresh the page, I can simply go back into the table. And once I select that save view, I'll see only those enterprise accounts grouped by country, just like before. I'm going to show you how to create a search function. We'll go to where we want the results to populate, and we'll type equals filter, open parentheses. Then we'll go to our data set and select the range that we want to return. In this case, I'm going to do B2 through D. Then I'll put a comma, type the word search, open parentheses. Then select the cell that we'll be searching with. Then after a comma, we'll go to our data set and select the column that we want to search. And since I'm searching the company, I'll select the company column. So now we're all set up. So if I search EL, if the company has EL anywhere in the name, it'll populate on the list. Or if I type MI, it will populate just the same. Now, if there is no active search, you'll see the entire list. But if you want to only show the list if there is a search, you can type if is blank, open parentheses, select the search cell, close parentheses, comma, and then inside quotes, you can put whatever text you want to return. So I'll put no active search. Then I'll put a comma and press enter. So now it will say no active search unless there's an active search happening. We're going to talk about the filter formula, not filtering, but the filter formula itself. So for example, in my data set, I have all of the countries listed by their target, whether primary or secondary. And I want to see which companies fall into the primary targets and which ones are in the secondary. And I want to return all of the companies, so I'll select A2 through the end of column A. Then after a comma, we'll put our filter condition. So I want to filter by the target, so I'll select C2 through the end of column C equals E1. And now it will show me every single company that's listed as primary target. Now, instead of making this formula again to see the secondary targets, we're simply going to anchor in both of these range to make it an absolute reference, and then drag the formula over, so now it's referencing F1 instead. And now we can see our secondary targets super easily. I'm going to show you how to automatically sync your spreadsheet with Google Slides. So for example, I have a slide right here, and I want to insert the chart of how many miles I've biked this year. So I can go back to my spreadsheet, copy the chart, and paste it in my slide. Now it'll ask me if I want to link to spreadsheet or paste it unlinked. I want to link to spreadsheet, that way I can update it automatically later on. And now you'll see the chart inside your slide. And depending on your formatting, this might look fine. But since I have a dark background to my slide, it sticks out a little bit too much. So I want to change the format of it. So I'm going to go into my chart editor and change the background and the border color to none. And then I'm going to go in and change all the different text options to white. And I'm going to run through this pretty quickly since this is not what the video is on. But at the end of the day, I'm simply making changes to the chart. So now that all the updates are made, when I go back onto my slide, I can simply click update. and the update will flow through with the new formatting. And this will work when there's any changes, so whether it's data that's updated, formatting, whatever, it will work. And if you have multiple charts in your deck, you can update all at once. I'm going to show you how to embed a formula directly into your header. So for example, in cell B2, I have an XLOOKUP formula, and I want to put this in my header instead. So I'm going to copy this formula, delete the equals, then go into my header. I'll put equals, open curly bracket. I'll put the name of the header inside of quotes, then a semicolon. Now, since it's already typed, I'm going to paste that XLOOKUP formula. Right after the semicolon before the XLOOKUP, I'm going to type ARRAYFORMULA, open parentheses. Then I'm going to change the search key to A2:A. At the very end of the formula, I'll put a second close parentheses and then a closed curly bracket. And now once I press enter, that formula will execute all the way down to the end of the column as long as something exists. And if you look, you won't see any formulas down there. It's only going to show numbers except for that one formula. But since it goes all the way to the end of the column, if future data is added, the formula will execute automatically. All you have to do is just fix the formatting. I'm going to show you how to cross out an entire line when a checkbox is checked. And this will work for a lot of things, not just checkboxes. So the first thing we're going to do is select the entire range that we want to format, then go to Format, Conditional Formatting. Then you'll see the conditional format rules pop up to the right side. Under Format Rules, we'll select Custom Formula Is. And the biggest thing with this is you need to make sure that the row number that you're referencing is the same row number that starts your range. So for example, I'll put equals B2 because that's what started our range, equals true. And after that, I can simply select whichever formatting I want. In this case, I want it to be a light gray background and for the text to be crossed out. And as you can see, when I check the box, only column A is formatted. And that's because I need to anchor in the column that I'm referencing. So I'm going to anchor in column B with a $sign. And now whenever I check a box, the entire line is crossed out. And this one definitely made my life better. It's the query formula and it's one of my favorites. And the query formula works a lot like SQL if you're familiar with that, but the purpose is to answer questions. The biggest thing is you have to follow these order of operations. So for example, we can say equals query, open parentheses, then select the range that we want to query. We'll put a comma, then inside quotes, we'll put our query. So we'll start with select. You can put an asterisk if you want to return all columns, but I want to return just A and the sum of column C. And I want it to only show up where column A is not null, which means it's not blank. I want to group the results by industry, so I'm going to say group by A. And I want it to be sorted by the highest amount sold to the least amount sold, so I'll say order by sum of column C in descending order, and I'll put DESC for descending. And I'm going to say limit 3 so I can see the top 3. And in just a few seconds, I'm able to see which of the top 3 industries that sold the most. I'm going to show you how to make a table chart, which is great for dashboards. So the first thing we'll do is select our data, then go to Insert Chart. Under the chart type, we're going to drop down and select Table Chart. And what's cool about this is you can scroll down even if it's only in one chart because it has all the data. But what's even better is you can aggregate it, so it will summarize based off of the industry, for example. We no longer need the company name since it's aggregated. So I'm going to remove that, and then we can go to Customize. And this allows us to do different things. So for example, I can sort the column by the price, and I want it to be descending, so I'll uncheck ascending. And I could add different row numbers as well to see what their rank is. And best of all, we didn't have to use a pivot table or anything. We just did that right inside of a chart. I showed you how to build this search function. And with this, results will appear if the text is anywhere in the name. But if you have a long list, that could be really annoying if there's a lot of things that just aren't going to populate any results. So a way to combat this is to type equals COUNTIF, then go to our companies. So we'll select all of column B. Then we'll go back to our search page. And we're going to type quote asterisk quote ampersand left open parentheses the contents of the search term we want to search, comma 3 close parentheses ampersand quote asterisk quote. And what this will do is it will search for the first 3 letters of that search term anywhere in the company name and return how many times it exists. So as we can see, acknowledge has 0, so ACK showed up 0 times. So we know we don't need to search that one, but just for example, we can search it just to show you. Now sys is in there once, but sysgo is not necessarily in there, so be mindful of that. But this is a great tool to know which ones to search. I'm going to show you how to reflect your data in a chart of the United States. So for example, on my table, I have all of the different states as well as the number of items sold per state. I'm going to select both of those columns and go to Insert Chart. Under Chart Type, I'm going to use the drop down to select GeoChart, which is right under Map. And then I'm going to go to Customize, Geo. By default, it defaults to the world. So I'm going to drop down and select United States. And now I can see all the results reflected per state. So I can hover over each state to see how many items were sold per state. And it's color coded based off of the data for that state. So the darker the red, the least they sold, and the darker the green, the more they sold. You can customize these colors. So for example, if I want to say blue for the max, then now we have blue representing the maximum. So right here, I have a chart of all of the average prices and numbers sold per industry. And it's based off of this table right here. So if I want to filter this, instead of filtering based off of the table or inside the chart itself, I can simply select the chart, then go to Add Slicer, and select which column I want to filter by. So I'll filter by the industry, for example. Then I'm going to copy and paste that to the right, and double click on it and change the column to price. So now I can quickly filter based off of the different industries. So for example, I can clear everything except for science and tech and hit OK. And I can quickly see that the lower the price, the more sold. At least that's what it appears. And if I want to only see items that were sold that were above $100, I can say greater than 100, hit OK. And I'm able to see exactly that. And the coolest thing about slicers, in my opinion, is that you're able to slice and dice the data, and you're able to save a lot of time doing analysis. And in this one, I'm going to show you how to compare two different lists to find missing values. So for example, we have our outreach list, and these are all the companies that we need to reach out to. And it looks like our team has made a lot of progress, but we're still missing some. I have no idea by looking at this which ones are missing, but it's super easy to figure out. I'm going to go over to the right to have space for my list, and I'm going to type equals filter, open parentheses. I'll select the first list, put a comma, not, open parentheses, count if, open parentheses, select all of the second list, comma, the first list. Then I'll press enter and it will show me exactly which companies are missing from the second list that were present in the first list. So in just a few seconds, I know exactly which companies my team needs to reach out to. I'm going to show you how to extract part of a text. So for example, with this email, I can extract the username before the @ or the domain after. To accomplish this, I'll type equals index, open parentheses, split, open parentheses, select the email, then put a comma, quote, @ quote, close parentheses. Then I'll put a comma and put either a 1 or a 2. And if I put a 1, it will return the username that's before the @. And if I put a 2, it will return the domain that's after the @. So let's put a 2, for example, and it will return the email domain. And of course, I'm using fake email, so it's just returning example.com. And if I wanted to change this to a 1 instead, it would return the first part ahead of the @. And how this works is normally when you have a split formula, you're splitting the text before and after the delimiter. And the delimiter is a special character you identify. So I have John Smith, and then I have example.com, but this takes 2 columns. So by using index, this allows you to execute this formula with only 1 column instead. And this one's definitely a must know. So what we're going to do is compare the revenue for each company, and we're going to return which company type it falls into. So under company type, we're going to type equals XLOOKUP, open parentheses, select the annual revenue, put a comma, then we're going to select our thresholds, and we're going to anchor those in with $signs so they do not move, put a comma. Then we're going to select all the company types and we're going to anchor those in as well. If we can't find a value, we're going to leave it blank. So we'll just put 2 commas and then we want the match mode. So as you can see here, an exact match is 0, which is default. Then a 1 means that it will round up to the next threshold, and a -1 means it will round down to the next threshold. In this case, we want it to round down. So I'm going to put a -1 and press enter. And as you can see, it's looking at the revenue, finding the threshold just beneath the revenue listed, and returning the value to the right. And this is called an XLOOKUP with a relative match, and it will come in handy more often than you think. Talking Sparklines. And if you don't know what Sparklines are, they're really just a way to have tiny little graphs inside the cell. So for example, we can type equals Sparkline, then select the 3 quarters, and then double click on that, and we have a line chart graphing what trend is happening. And you'll see this a lot, but it actually goes a lot further. So for example, I can put a comma, then an open curly bracket, and I want to add a column chart. And if you click on learn more, you can see all the different details of what functionalities each has. And anything that's text is in quotes, and you'll need to separate the different types by semicolons. So for example, I could say chart type, comma, column, semicolon, y min, comma, 0, semicolon, y max, comma, 10,000. So the y vertical will be from 0 to 10,000, semicolon, color, comma, blue. Then I'll close it out with a closed curly bracket. And now you can see a bar chart showing exactly how the trends are going for each person. So that's a few ways to use Sparklines to create little charts inside the rows. And as you can see in the help box, you can do a lot more, so play around with it as you have time. You can right click on a cell, then go to show edit history and see exactly what the contents of the cell were prior and the entire history of that cell. And if something looks off with a specific cell, that's a great way to fix it. But if it's a lot of cells, it's better to look at things as a whole. Now, best practice before you start making a bunch of edits is to go to File, Version History, then name the current version. And you can name it whatever you want. This will just help you identify it from all the different versions later. And since Google Sheets saves after every edit, there's a lot of versions, trust me. So let's say you accidentally messed everything up and there's a lot of things that are wrong. All you have to do to restore your prior version is go to File, Version History, see Version History, And now you can quickly identify what the final version was that was good. Select that and click restore this version. And of course, if you don't have it named, it still works the same. It's just a little bit harder to find the right version. But once it's restored, things are good as new. Just keep in mind that if anything was added after you save the version, it will no longer be there. And the next one is one of my favorites, especially when it comes to automation. And we're talking about import range, which brings live data from a different spreadsheet into the spreadsheet you're working with. So for example, let's say I want to bring the company and the outreach date into a different spreadsheet. All I need to do is copy the URL, then go to a different spreadsheet, and wherever we want to put it, we'll type equals import range, open parentheses, then paste the URL inside of quotes, then put a comma. And now we need to know the name of the tab as well as the columns that we want to pull. So the tab is called compare lists, and we want to sync columns C and D. So inside quotes, we'll type compare lists, exclamation point, C:D. And you'll see a reference error at first. All you have to do is click allow access and it will automatically sync the data. So as you can see, we automatically sync the data from the other spreadsheet into a different spreadsheet. And the best thing is that it's a live sync. So if any of the data changes, it will automatically update on both sheets. There are a whole bunch of different use cases for this, especially with automation. And as always, let me know if you have any questions. Don't forget to subscribe and like and comment for more.